this is just about to go live.
Okay.
This meeting is now being live streamed. Got it. Jolly good. And we're a minute early, which is jolly good. How the devil are you?
I'm well.
That's good.
Nice.
And who the devil are you?
Well, I think like all of us, I am 10% this avatar called Julie Pershin, and another 10% soul, and about 80% source.
Right. Okay. Well, the reason I set this up really was to sort of get people come on from all backgrounds and just to explain some of the terminology that people use, because my background's biomedical science, I'm sort of locked into all this scientific stuff, you see. And people come on and they talk about source and avatars and things like that. And some of the people who listen in, right, have got no idea what we're talking about. So maybe we can go into that. Just bear with me 1 sec while I see. Oh, yes, we've got some people coming in now. Write a comment. So, Julie, where are you based?
Oregon?
Oregon.
Just
Okay.
one state above California, just below Washington on the
Oh,
west
right.
coast.
Okay. So you say it's north of California, is it?
And south of Washington, yep.
Right. I've had the pleasure of California. I loved it over there. I went to LA and I did a lot of traveling around and running on the beach from Santa Monica and all those places. I loved it. Yeah. I had to go and give some talks at UCLA. And yeah, I was giving some talks on holistic medicine and integrative medicine and all those sort of things. And I was trying at the time to bring science into this sort of woo-woo aspects of, whole health, right? And that's what I've been doing ever since, really, is to try and bring some neuroscience into what I feel at depth is the future of medicine. Now, have you got a PhD, did I hear?
Well, I have what's called a Master's of Science in Oriental Medicine.
Oh, right.
So in the United States, if you want to practice Chinese medicine, so let's go back a little bit. If you want to practice Chinese medicine in China, you have to pick a track. You have to choose whether you want to be an herbologist or whether you want to be an acupuncturist.
Right.
In the United States, when you study Chinese medicine, you study both at once. And once you are licensed to practice both herbology and acupuncture. So I went to school at Southwest Acupuncture College in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it was a 4-year program, but I chose to do it in 3 years. So I just took a few more clinics and a few more classes than everybody else every term. And when I walked away from that, I ended up with a Master's of Science in Oriental Medicine. And then the other hoops that I had to jump through to get licensed was to take 4 national boards and 1 state board. And then that granted me a license that I had to renew every year. And then I became an acupuncturist and herbologist. But I have since retired from that. I'm very glad I studied it because knowing your way around the 5 elements and Chinese medicine in general is useful on many, many levels. It's useful for maintaining one's physical health. It's useful on the spiritual path. And that's one thing, Joe, that I see that you and I have in common is that we're not strictly science and we're not strictly spiritual. We're more spiritual scientists. And I really, in the past year or two, I've really had cause to do an overview or sort of review my life and look at what has worked and what doesn't work, and what still can be integrated, and where I'm headed and what areas I want to grow. And I really see how, leaning just towards science for me personally, doesn't really cut it. And leaning just towards spirituality, or what some people consider woo-woo, doesn't cut it. But when you mix the two together, wow, that's where the power really, really comes in. And I'm also very interested in the neurosciences. I started a blog about a year ago, and this past little while, I chose to delve more deeply than I've ever delved into the chakras. And there were so many things that, I mean, I've been working with my chakras for years now, but there were aspects and layers and levels that I actually had no clue about, because I didn't, while I was working with them, I didn't really stop to study the intricacy. And so, the reason I'm talking about this is because when we talk about neurosciences, we think of, or I think of at least, the central nervous system, but I also especially think of the endocrine system. And when I think of the endocrine system, I think of how our emotions and beliefs trigger mechanisms within this endocrine system to produce body chemistry in the form of neurotransmitters and hormones in our body. And so, even though a story can be long gone, that chemistry is still, until it's integrated, it's still circulating through our central nervous system. So now it's not that we're reliving the story as much as the body chemistry, the same neurotransmitters and hormones are looping again and again and again throughout our central nervous system. And so this has been my area of interest as of late. And what I've noticed in my life in the past 3 years, and keeps becoming more potent, especially in the past year, is that if I put my nose to the grindstone and try to have a little bit of fun doing it, and I learn more about my body and the mechanisms within and the body chemistry, and which chakras, for instance, are connected to which endocrine glands and all of this. And then I also listen to spirit, because, spirit sends me some pretty wild messages, and I have some things that happen to me that, maybe only people in Soulology or people on here or a handful of my friends might believe. But if I told the everyday person, I might get carried away, into some van and go to a special hospital. So
I know it well.
so my job then for myself is to keep connecting to spirit, to build the trust and build the faith, and keep working with this body chemistry, and keep learning as much as I can while I'm alive about this body and how it works, and become as whole and integrated and as expansive. Like my worst nightmare would be to, on the inhale of my last breath or the exhale of my last breath, to have the thought, oh, I didn't utilize my full potential. To me, that would be a nightmare. That would be feeling like my life was wasted at my last breath is not where I'm headed. I want to feel like, hey, I did the best I could with the time I had, and I don't have any regrets, because it did integrate the experiences, and I did get squared away in my central nervous system. Actually, I made a post the other day. I think I might even want to make a t-shirt, but it says, a well-regulated central nervous system is the new sexy. And I really think that's true, And when I say sexy, I don't mean two people copulating. I mean our accessing our procreative energy, When we are well regulated, we can access our creative energy, and we can really tap in to the blueprint that we were given when we arrived here, and start to access more and more of ourselves. And so those are the types of things that excite me, Dr. Joe.
Yeah, we're on the same page in all sorts of ways, really. I describe myself, as you might have heard, as a psycho-neuro-endocrino-immunohematologist.
Very sexy. I love it.
Yes, and So just to explain to our customers, psycho to me means soul. It doesn't mean mind, it means soul. You know, it's the deeper, the depths of information processing, really. And I think the P also means perception, because there's a phrase that says that, you know, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are, you know. And that means that everybody could be in the same circumstances, but we all see different things and we all process information. So the P could stand for psycho, right? And some people have called me a psycho, you know, and some people could call it perceptual or processing. So P is important there. But what I try and explain to people is the way that we process information, both consciously and unconsciously, will determine the way that we feel and react to life or respond to life, which will then cause us to make certain decisions. And then we choose those decisions based upon how we see the world. Now, in that decision-making process, we send electrical information down our nervous system from the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, as well, you know, through the autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is almost like a programmed automatic system that responds to certain patterns. Most of those patterns laid down in the first 7 years of our life, you know, so they're the coping strategies that we develop within the first 7 years. From my studies, and I've been doing this for about 35 years now, I've realized that most people, including myself, I didn't have a clue about this, were responding to those coping strategies that we laid down in childhood. And we never really had a chance because we were so distracted externally. We never had an opportunity to turn our eyes the other way around and look within and see how we actually process information. And I'm glad to say, and fortunate to say, that I had a complete collapse and a massive nervous breakdown, right? And I was put into a psychiatric department on more than one occasion, right? But on the last occasion, right, I was in there for 8 weeks. And in that process, I began to see that really I was nothing more than a programmed automaton, and I'd been programmed into slavedom, really. So that was the start of my sort of waking up process. And this was in 1987. It was at the time called the harmonic convergence, you know.
Yep.
And my head was absolutely battered with all this information flying in. And I just didn't have the ability or the mechanisms to be able to process it slowly to gain some understanding. So at that point, not only was I trying to take all sorts of tablets, but I was trying to throw myself off bridges and stuff and smash my head against the wall, you know, and I had a lot of psychotic attacks, right? And I was obviously hospitalized for my own safety at the time. But in that process, I started to realize, with the help of the health professionals who helped me, they started to ask me questions that basically, they started to ask me things, not tell me things. And this was unusual because I'd been to medical people before and they told me what I needed to do. The people in the psychiatric department asked me, who are you, Joe? Who are you in there? And where on earth did you get all these ideas from about living? And something switched in me. I began to realize that really my actions were just conditions and programs that were basically fed me from other people. And so when the information came into my 5 senses, I was processing the information based upon how I'd been conditioned. So that was really the start of a deconditioning process that went on. Now, the thing is, as I started to see the truth of who I was, this fury built up. Look what they've done to me. But I was fortunate enough to have somebody who guided me through the process to say, Joe, they never did it to you. Believe me, right? At some level, you've allowed this to happen, right? For the purposes of your growth towards self-mastery. I didn't have a clue what he was talking about, but I do now, right? And I can see now, some people believe that before we come here, we develop some sort of soul's purpose or soul's curriculum. Fair enough, you know, if you believe that and it works for you, that's good. Some people believe that, you know, we're conditioned into that by other people for the same purpose, to be able to overcome are emotional reactions to life, and I do believe that. So there's all sorts of different views on why it happens, but all I can say, Julie, is something changed in my mind. And when I came out of the psychiatric department, I saw a completely different world. So my mind had started to change. The information coming in was being processed in a different way. And I started to realize really that I more or less had to start with a clean sheet from then, and also to base my life then on how I felt and what I thought. So making up my life then from my own personal lived experience and not matching to any belief system that was in me. I've gone on a bit there, but I mean, more than ever now, I'm able now to, rather than react to stuff, I can, if I get triggered for any reason, and I still do in lots of ways, I feel the trigger. Rather than going forward now, I breathe the trigger away, take a step back, develop some space, and then look at the big picture, and then make a choice based upon a larger sort of expanded thing. And that's how I live my life now. And I can honestly say, I've never felt more emotionally calm, cool, and collected. I feel very clear in my mind, and like you, spirit, whatever spirit means, because I think spirit emerges in me. It's like an intuition or an inspiration that emerges, and it almost like presents new information to me. And it says, "Here, son, what do you make of that?" And I go, "Hang on a second, give me some time to have a look at it. Okay, now you've seen this bit here. What action are you going to take?" Because Julie, more than anything else, I know loads and loads of people who are filled with inspiration and ideas, right? But they don't put it into practice. And I was like that for ages. I was being filled with all this information, this new information. But I realized today, in order to materialize it and make it real, we have to take some action and take some steps to actually manifest it. Over to you, old chap. See what you've got to say about that.
Well, I very much agree. And I was in that place for a long time of being sort of the perennial collector of information, but then not putting it to practice. So for instance, when I was in my late 20s, I started studying Tibetan Buddhism. And it awakened me to a lot of things. There's some quantum physics there. There's a whole lot. It's rich. But I was all about, well, I was studying as well, like there were groups of us that would study texts together and then, put what we were learning into practice in our everyday life. It's not like it was totally ungrounded in me, but I was very much about, the next retreat and the next empowerment. But then my meditation practice was really suffering. But this was also because of an unregulated central nervous system, and some patterns of gluttony there, like, just like a hungry ghost almost, like, oh, I want more and more and more and more information. It's like, well, what is all of this information going to do unless you put it into practice and it helps you in your everyday life and in your soul's evolution? So, but that's okay. I mean, I was where I was and where I needed to be, and it just took me a while to grow into understanding, like, hey, Chicky Poo, if you're going to get somewhere, you're going to have to really like settle down and dig your heels in. And I also really believe in karmic imprints and in epigenetics and in carrying the patterns of our ancestors until those are integrated. And I had some pretty heavy patterns in the ancestral lines. My father was molested by his uncle when he was 5, and he buried that in his subconscious, and it ruled his life. And he definitely dealt with some polarity. I think if you put a label on there, you could say bipolar. And there was a lot of fear that would come out in anger of needing to be in control of the situation. So, in his subconscious, if he wasn't in control of a situation, then that meant he might get harmed again, right? So, and then with my own mother, she jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco when I was 19. So in my head, that was always an opportunity or a possibility for me, as an idea of a way out if things got too hard. And I battled a lot of depression in my own adult life for many, many years. And now I'm coming out on the other side, and as I do this work, I consider a lot of things. I consider Julie in this body, and I consider what some people might call past lives, but more than that, like my own multidimensionality. Like I'm very aware of what's going on in Julie's life right here, and I'm not constantly seeking for what's going on in my other dimensions or what's gone on in my past lives. Those clues or that information will come to me when it's pertinent for this life. And that's the way that I work with that information. But so I really feel as, it's all happening here because
Yeah.
I'm not living on Arcturus in as this physical body. I'm not living in inner earth. I'm not living somewhere else. I'm living here. So this is where it all happens. But I do know that as my reality changes and my choices change and my body chemistry changes, that also informs all of those other facets, because I really do believe in the past, present, future happening simultaneously. And so I take that into consideration, and I very much take my ancestors into consideration. Um, because I really do believe that if I'm changing my body chemistry, I'm changing my story, I'm changing my thoughts and habits, and I'm accessing more of myself, that goes forward and backwards in my lineage. So that helps my paternal and maternal lineages. And I believe, and this is where it gets a little more esoteric and could sound ungrounded, but really what I believe, more than a mental belief, this I have a sense or a knowing that, I think many people can limit the way they think about ancestry as it's just my mother and my father in this lifetime. And I think of my ancestry as myself in those other dimensions. And I think of, if you want to call it past lives, my ancestors were whoever I was connected to when I wasn't in this body, but I was somebody else. And so when you're doing your work and you think of how far that travels through your ancestral line and realize that it's not just this ancestry, and then you take it even bigger to realize we're a human family. And so everybody is our ancestor. So really, when you like lots of us, we want to do something grand, something big, maybe we want our name to be known, or we want to write that book that's gonna, have everybody wanting us on their talk show or whatever it is. But really just working on yourself quietly behind the scenes is is superhero work. To me, that's the superhero work. It doesn't matter who knows, or I mean, definitely I encourage people, if you have tools in your toolbox, if you have something that helps you turn your body chemistry around or changed your life around, and it's repeatable and traceable and it gets results, by all means share it with the world. But in the meantime, I'm living a very humble existence. I'm a live-in caretaker for an 84-year-old man that was um, his family and my family were friends when I was growing up here in Oregon. And I moved from Oregon a long time ago in 2003 to Santa Fe, and I stayed there until March of 2002, and I came here. And while I was in Santa Fe, I did want to start writing. I wanted to start a blog, and I wanted to have a YouTube channel, and all of these things, but I wasn't doing it. I was really stagnant, and um, and it wasn't about like, oh, I want to get my name out there, or anything like that. It was this creative calling that when I look at my human design, or I look at my Mayan glyph, or I look at my astrology, I'm now living my blueprint, whereas before I was distracted, or I was afraid, or my ego was telling me about all the why nots. And so since I've been here, I have, had a chance to be of service to Ken, and I've had a chance to really go inward, and I've had a chance to explore writing and putting myself out there and helping other people become seen by bringing them on my show as well. And so I wouldn't say Soology was the impetus for that, because I already had a calling and a desire to do that. But when COVID came around and I discovered Soology, it really did catalyze me and give me some drive and desire to want to go deeper into those things. And I also was noticing when I was in Santa Fe, I felt the calling. Like I was like, one day in November, November of 21, I just heard your days here are numbered, in Santa Fe. And I was like, okay, well, I'm moving on. I guess if I listen to spirit real closely, then I'll be pointed in the right direction. And it's very interesting, because how I ended up here was I put a post on Facebook and I said, my days in Santa Fe are numbered, a change is brewing. And Ken, the man I caretake for, his son texted me and said, hey, it looks like you're ready for a change. Would you like to come live on the Oregon coast and take care of my father as a live-in caretaker? And I was like, that's it. That's the, because that's full circle, right? Because I left to Santa Fe from here. But the other interesting component is that Brian, the son, when I was 15, we went to the same high school. And on February 14th of 1983, I went to jazz choir, and the instructor informed us that the French club would be having a to-do that evening. And we didn't have to go, but we had been invited to sing at the event, and it was up to us whether we went or not. But if we didn't show up, he was going to dock our grade, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I was so proud. I didn't want my A to turn to a B. Interestingly enough, I had a boyfriend who I had broken up with, and I wanted to get back together with him. So I had booked us a dinner at an Italian restaurant, and I was going to ask him if we could reconnect. And I changed that plan because I didn't want my A to turn into a B. Well, so after the event, long story short, Brian was driving, and we got in a nearly fatal car accident where I lost half the blood in my body and was in ICU for 3 days, et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't matter so much about that story. It's just very interesting karmically to me, because this is what I'm doing here. Although nobody might understand it or could make sense of it, this is a huge transformational piece in my life, leaving Santa Fe and coming here. I got rid of about 90% of what I owned. I said, these possessions are weighing me down. It's too much. It's too much to maintain. I want a simple life. And so here I have sort of reduced my life to, the most simple common denominator, and then I'm building from this point. And the reason I told the story about the car accident is because I just find it very interesting that Brian played a role in that and also played a role in this.
Yeah, karma, very, very interesting. I'm always scratching the surface of what's going on, to be honest with you. I live in a state where people used to ask me questions, and if I didn't know the answer, I'd make something up, so not as to look a fool, But when people ask me questions now, I just say, I don't know, I'm not quite sure, and that's a big turnaround for me, because I was what's called a know-all-knows, I won't say that. I was what's called a knowledgeable idiot. I did know lots of things about medicine and biomedicine and science and things like that. But about myself, I didn't have a clue whatsoever, you know. And for me, I had to go through that process in order for the light to go on, really, you know. And I work with a lot of people who are at their rock bottoms and just don't seem to be able to let go of their old patterns and their old habits and their old way of life, you know. And it's sort of my job, right? Because I'm a sponsor in AA, you know, and I work with a lot of people who've got addiction problems. And all I can do really is share what's happened to me, share what my suggestions of how they could get better, and then try and guide them through the process of them taking the action that they need to. But the thing is, I got told the way that we can help people is by raising the rock bottom. And the way that you raise the rock bottom is you share from the heart, you know, and something happens in the transmission of that process. But then you don't just leave them there and say, if you carry on doing it, it's going to get worse, because people already know that, right? But you offer them the solution. And to me, the solution is to metaphorically decapitate ourselves, because that's where all the patterns are. Throw away all the ideas, all the emotions, all the attitudes. The driving forces of our life up to that point is just to jettison the whole lot and start with a clean sheet, working on feelings first, you know. So I'm trying to write a book. It's called The F Off Approach to Health and Happiness. And F Off stands for focus on feelings first, you know. And I'm not a writer, I'm a talker, as you can tell, you know, and I'm not afraid whatsoever about being up on the stage and doing, I love the performance, you know, it excites me, you know, and whether that's egomania or my purpose in life, I don't really care, because I don't try and work it out anymore. I'm not in the, is it my ego driving me, or is it spirit, or what is it, you know, I don't get into that anymore. I just open my heart at the beginning of the day and just say, what's on the cards today, boss, you know, and that's how I sort of live my life. And then I do exactly what I feel then. And people say to me, you know, they have done, right, oh, that's very selfish. No, it's not. It's exactly the opposite of being selfish, actually. And I'm not here. This is a strange thing I say, but it's just the way my head processes things. I am not here, right, to be of service to mankind first and foremost. I'm here to be of service to this thing that's in me, driving me. Because in a sort of paradoxical way, if I do what I feel and what I please, secondarily, other people seem to benefit as a consequence of it. So I'm not chasing ambulances anymore. I'm not trying to save the world. I'm not trying to save souls. None of that stuff. All I'm trying to do is to be more and more and more free, right? To allow this thing to express itself through me, you know, and that's where I'm up to, Julie. And, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day, and there's this thing about let's raise our vibration. I don't agree with that. And this is just me, you know, I think that let's get out of the way and let the vibration raise us, you know, because I do say I'm not a religious person. I've dumped all that, you know. If you're a religious person, then that's great. If it's making you a nicer person and you're nice to be around and you're more loving and kind and considerate, great, carry on. That sounds like a good thing. But I had to dump all that, you know, because I was fed with such a lot of fear-based stuff, right, that it was actually obstructing my real self trying to get out, you know. And my thing is that I encourage, there are people who are afraid, and my job is really to try and encourage them to sort of grow themselves and make their own choices. So to facilitate an environment where they can take the steps they need to outgrow fear. So that's the fearful side of the person. But I deal with a lot of academic people, right, who are full of academic and intellectual pride, like I was, you know, and I needed somebody to discover and help me to discover a chink in my armor. And this bloke who worked for me, he's a sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous, he said to me, you know, you're very knowledgeable. And I could feel myself brimming with pride, you know. You're a very knowledgeable chap. I thought, yes, he's obviously cottoned on to my magnificence, you know. And then he said, doesn't seem to have done you any good, though, because everything that you've ever learned has brought you to the point of trying to kill yourself. And I thought, oh, maybe he's right, you know, and you know, so things like that. And he said, why don't you do yourself a favor? When you wake up in the morning, start with a clean sheet and go from there based upon how you feel and experiencing life as it comes at you. and dig in deep to find out your particular skills and attributes and gifts, and try and live your life through that point, And Julie, that's what I do every day, and I do live a life now of I haven't got a clue, because it seems to be the most simple way. And if I haven't got a clue, and I've done it for such a long time now, I can trust that this thing in me, if I sit still and shut up long enough, it will send a little bit of information, inspiration or intuition, and it will tell me, turn left at the bottom of the street. And
Yeah.
that's how I live. That's how I live my life now. It's become that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. Simplicity is my aim too. And it is interesting, I didn't even think about it, ponder it, know about it, consider it until, recently, that like, hey, I think my mentor said to me sometime back, he said, what if you woke up in the morning and you just tune in and you feel like, are you in more of your emotional self? Or are you feeling more physical, or are you feeling more mental? And then based on your answer, shape your day around that. And so you can still do everything you want to do in a day or need to do in a day, but with that as your theme. And I think that's a beautiful way to live. It's very, parallel to what you were just talking about. I have been studying with a mentor for the past 5 years or so, and I know, everybody talks about, oh, this isn't the time of a guru. This is not the time for a guru. And my mentor is not my guru by any means. And I also listen to Gigi Young on YouTube, and very interesting because, she talks about cosmology. She talks about a lot of things, but, recently heard her say, so here we are, we're in this post-Atlantean epoch. And this epoch is very much about doing away with the guru, right? And you become, it's all about self-mastery, really. Yeah. And so my mentor is also very much into the neurosciences and endocrinology and spiritual science, blending the two together. And he has developed something called the integrity process, and it's a way of transforming, transcending, transmuting, however you want to put it, trauma. And so he breaks it down, talk about breaking it down to simplicity, and he did this all through conversation. He works a lot with a pendulum, but he connects a lot with Yeshua and with Mary Magdalene and, his spirit guides and his team or whatever. And so he'll ask questions, he'll ask questions about physiology and about anything really. And then he'll, either be told something or be guided to information. And through that, he developed this whole the integrity process. So it's very interesting. He's saying that there are really only 3 beliefs and 3 emotions, that all other beliefs and all other emotions are subsumed in these 3. So the 3 emotions are fear, anger, and sadness. He said you can take any emotion you had and you can trace it back to one of those. And you'll often find a root. Now, sometimes your emotions might be traced to a few of those, okay? But those are the 3 main ones. Then the 3 main beliefs are, I've been abandoned, it's not fair, or I'm not enough. And then he goes further to break that down into, dopamine, serotonin, or oxytocin. And so it was very enlightening to take that course. It's still, I still have, it was there's 8 videos that I have to refer to that I can just keep watching over and over and over. And every time I listen, I get something different. And I let's see if I can share a little bit. That's something that's more practical. So fight, flight, or freeze. This is something that comes up on your show a lot, and it comes up in the world a lot right now. We're talking about like how to get ourselves out of this sympathetic nervous system into the sympathetic. How do you do that, right? As we know, one of the ways is to breathe in, say to a count of 4, and then breathe out for twice as long, for about 3 minutes. That'll get you straight into your parasympathetic nervous system, right? So, but in terms of fight, flight, or freeze, he was saying, and he's been working with this, right? It's not just like, okay, spirit told me this, so it's this. It's like he's been working with this for years and years and years before he put it out into the public. But so for anger, he's saying when we are angry, to vocalize. That could be chanting, it could be singing, it could be screaming if that's what you need to do. But that it's the vocalizing something will get us out of that fight mode, because that's what anger is. It's fight mode, right? Then in relation to sadness, that's the flight mode, right? Where we want to run from our sadness. So he was saying doing a slow walking meditation can be very helpful when we feel we want to, we're drowning in our grief, or we want to take flight. And then for freeze, when we're having some fear and we just feel frozen, is to just do some spontaneous movement, just move around, go outside, run in the yard with your dogs, or turn on your favorite song and dance, or just do something, shake, whatever it is, just move. And to me, I mean, these are the kind of nuggets in that course that are just like practical, simple, in the moment things you can use. You don't have to sit down and read a book and try to figure this thing out. It's just like, oh, here, those are the kinds of things I really like, right? So then in relation to those 3 beliefs, this I'm not enough can really mess with our dopamine levels, because if you're not enough, then you can't, right? And he's even saying like, okay, just say, like, just saying I can, like 21 times in the morning and 21 times at night will literally raise your dopamine levels, so, and throughout that course, he does give, tips like I just gave you about the walking and the vocalizing and the moving and statements that you can make to build this. But he also to build that chemistry, the hormones and the neurotransmitters. For feeling abandoned, then that will make your serotonin levels plummet. So for feeling abandoned, he's saying like to connect to source, and whatever that is for you. For some people it's nature, for some people they have a name for it, God or whatever, but to connect to whatever it is you consider source, right? And then really like surrendering to that, not surrender as in give up or that's in control, but just surrender to source, and that helps build serotonin. And literally saying, in the morning and at night 21 times, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender, will literally raise your serotonin levels. And when we feel like I'm not enough, we can also use well, I'm not enough also will mess with your not only your dopamine levels, but your oxytocin levels. And so for this, Cardamom essential oil in a diffuser can be very helpful, or even wearing it or carrying around and smelling it, especially if you're in a phase of isolation where you're really keeping to yourself. You don't want too much contact with people, and so maybe you're not getting enough contact, and so your oxytocin levels are low. Cardamom essential oil is really good for the abandonment. Fennel essential oil, especially on the abdomen, can be very helpful. And then this It's Not Fair bit, the essential oil that can help with that is coriander.
Love
Yeah.
it.
So just some tips for everybody, because I know that, when you get on here, you do bring the spiritual and the practical together. So I thought I would just offer something that's both. I also wanted to mention this. In one of your videos that I watched, you told the story of when you had just had it, and a man invites you to his apartment, and he has you say a prayer. Now, oh, you know what? This was you and Todd together on Sology where I heard this. And I can't tell you how many times I was like, okay, rewind, pause, and then I'd write down a sentence. Rewind, pause. It took me forever to track this, but I wrote it. I'll read it. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou will. Relieve me of this bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy will, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And I think this is great testimony to what you were saying about how you let spirit move you to do what you want to do, right? So here you are on your own channel and on other people's channels, sharing information that's very practical that people take away and use. I say this every day in the morning at my altar, and this was a gift from you. So
Well, I've got a thing going up my spine now, which is always a good sign. See, that people might think that that's a religious thing, but to me it's not.
no.
It's almost like I'm and I knelt down to say it, and as I was kneeling down, I was thinking, oh my God, I've been caught by the Jehovah's Witnesses, or I'm in a cult or something like that. And it wasn't that. It's a step in humility, really, and it's a step in letting go and accepting that at my current level of thinking, I didn't have the thoughts or the power to actually take the action that I know that I needed to take, But then there's another prayer. That's a step 3 prayer. If anybody wants that, if they go on Google and just put step 3 prayer, Alcoholics Anonymous, it's there free of charge. But there's another step 7 prayer. You go through a bit more stuff, and there's a step 7 prayer, and I'll say it now. It says, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, both good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Right, I'm nearly crying saying this now because it means so much to me. And when we broke this prayer down, or this request down, it was, look, you're saying both good and bad, Joe. What does that mean to you? Well, what I thought was good was actually bad, right? So I was cleaning the whole sheet, and then on a daily basis, then, I get shown, you need to think like this, and you need to take this action. Now, the old Joe would have said, oh no, that can't be right. Standing up for myself can't be right, but that's exactly it, you see. So you start with a clean sheet. You don't know, you've got no idea of what you should do. You just turn up and then get moved by spirit. And sometimes, Julie, as you know, in order to grow and navigate through life, sometimes you've got to back off, right? And sometimes you've got to go forward. If you can't do either of those things, then you're stuck in an old habit. So you're knackered, really. And that's why one breath at a time, one moment at a time, I never know which is the right decision to make. I have to allow my heart and soul to guide me to do it. And it seems to work, And also, the problem was that in my mind, I knew what I needed to do to change. But here's what I learned more than anything else is, it wasn't knowing what to do. It was the lack of power to do it that was the dilemma. and I
Amen.
couldn't generate sufficient power from my cognitive process. I had to release some of the fear, which then brought in the power to take the actions I needed to outgrow further fear then, you know. So this is, I agree. And when we say surrender, or when I say it, it's not giving in, right? No, it's not giving up, but it's giving in to the next level of your evolution. That's the way I look at it, really, you know. And I know sometimes that people think, you know, oh, he's a religious nut. I couldn't be further from the truth, you know. I've never been so irreligious in my life, you know. And when I'm talking about spirituality, I use the word vitality now, because to me, spirituality is all about energy and energetics, you know. And people say to me, well, what do you really do? And I'd say, well, if you want a term that encapsulates it all, it's energy medicine, really. It's understanding energy at all sorts of different frequencies, different vibrations, a bit Tesla, really, you know. But it's that there's different frequencies that are actually feeding in different streams of thought and consciousness, right, which can guide you from one moment to the next. Well, how do you know which one to listen to? Well, you ask your heart and you say, dear heart, please show me or inspire me, and then wait and see what comes in. And that's how I live my life now. Do I make mistakes? Of course I do, all the time. I'm only learning like others, you know, but I've practiced it for quite a long time now, and it seems to be working quite well. And the other thing about I honestly believe, you know, east is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. That was a famous poem, you know, by Rudyard Kipling. But I really think it's time now, when east is east and west is west, and I think that they're being allowed now to merge together once again in this divine union that people talk about. So how does it happen? What do we have to do? Get out of the way and allow the process, because the process is much more powerful than you are. So just get out of the way. What do you mean by that? Don't try and work it out. Just say to your heart, go on then, show me what you want me to do, you know. And I know now, Julie, that all my life I was trying to drive myself to what I wanted, and spirit, or my soul, was trying to guide me to what I needed. And the miracle comes is when your needs and your wants become the same thing, then you're free then. And that's the coherence that helps people to go forward then. Over to you, old chap.
I think that's beautiful. Can we go back to this for just 1 second?
Of course.
The line that says, take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. So take away my difficulties, that's easy to understand. That victory over them may bear witness. So they're saying that once you have victory over your difficulties, that's when you become of use to the world. Is that sort of what it's saying? How do you interpret that line?
It's both, really, because take away my difficulties. Bearing witness means people have got to see you going through the shit, right? They've got to see you suffering. They've got to see you actually going through hell, right? And then the next time they see you, it's changed. And then they say, how have you done that? And you say, it's easy, just say this prayer. So the bearing witness means that you become an example of the change. And then they ask you that.
Yeah. Fruit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I think that means. It means that you have to be seen to be going through these difficulties and almost described as a hopeless case, because I was described as a hopeless case, not possible to help him, psychotic, schizophrenic, all those sorts of things, you know. Horrendous it was. I mean, I look back now and I can't identify with the thinking or the behavior of that person, but I see clearly the process of it, you know. And if there is a soul's purpose, and I chose this, right, I think next time we'll pick a bit of an easier one next time. But when I was going through it, it was hell, you know, it was hell. But on this side of it, I'm glad that I've gone through it, right, because it does help other people. Because when I relate my experience to people, you can say, funny, they say, it's funny you say that, I'm like that. And I get a smile on the inside to think, yeah, I know that, right? Well, then they say, well, how'd you do it? And I have to say to them, I can't tell you exactly what you need to do, but your heart and your soul need. So this is how you get in touch. And then I showed them the opening of the heart technique. They start to feel the energy sort of moving them. And I'll say, that's really your soul or your spirit that will guide you now if you're willing to listen to it, really. And like my dad used to say is, son, think for yourself and play it by ear. They were his 2 rules for life, right? And to me, that means is, where did he get this idea from? Is it emerging, or is it some pattern that's being fed to me from the past, right? And play it by ear means to sensitively listen deep into yourself and try and feel the impulse that's trying to show you the direction to go in.
Wise man, and you can tell because he could break it down to 2 sentences.
Yeah.
When people can break something down really simple, you know that they've got it.
But my dad, he absolutely and utterly devout Christian, right? Devout Christian. And he followed the teachings of Jesus all of his life. And it worked perfectly for my dad, And, I've dispensed with that, but I do believe that the underlying principles remain the same. And I think we just get mixed up, don't we? We start fighting about terminology when the underlying principles are the same. And to me, I think that there's only 2 emotions. I think there's love on the one hand and fear on the other hand, really, And the other thing is, I don't think that humans can generate unconditional love. I think it can work through them, but anything that a human gets involved in is conditional, So I start to see that love flows through us and there's no object to it, right? It's just a feeling of love and just a sort of thing that drives us. But when we try and label it and point it towards something, I think that's when conditional loving comes in, and that's when all the problems get caused then.
Well, I think, I think what a lot of people call love isn't love at all. It's attachment.
Absolutely, I agree.
I don't want to argue, but I'd like to explore, because I don't see love as an emotion.
No, I don't either. I
Okay,
don't. I think emotions polite.
You were saying you think there's only 2 emotions, love and fear.
Oh, I see what you mean.
I don't
Okay, yeah.
think of love as an emotion.
Yeah, I think love is a flow, really, a flow. I think emotions bipolar in some way, or even multipolar and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think people would go into become objective about your thinking and do that like metacognition where you're thinking about your thinking. And I think that you can get into splitting down emotion then to say, that's envy, that's jealousy, that's grief, that's this, that, and and you can get into like an over analysis of your feeling state then when life's passing you by, really.
Yeah, that's why I like this integrity process, because it's like, really, if you're thinking of all these other emotions, that you just say, okay, at the root of this, what is there? Is there sadness? Is there fear? Or is there grief? And at the root of this, what is the belief? Am I feeling like I'm not enough, or like this isn't fair, or like I've been abandoned? It helps, because the mind, we all know the mind can really take us for a ride,
Well, how about this then? In the beginning, there was only love, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so there was only that primary force, that flow. Okay. Yeah. And the human being gets involved in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and that causes a basic obstruction then, and a bifurcation, really. So in the end, there's only the one feeling, but the other feeling represents an obstruction of sorts, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I live my life now. Am I open and flowing, or can I feel some sort of obstruction? And then if I feel an obstruction or the trigger comes in and I go, oh, hang on, obstruction there, come back. What's causing the block, boss? Oh, right, I see. I've told a bit of a fib there. I've over-exaggerated. I've said yes when I should have said no. Go back, apologize, say what you mean and mean what you say. And then as soon as you do that, then it opens it up and off comes and the flow goes again. Then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think it can be simpler than that.
Yeah. In this integrity process, you start off by coming into awareness. So instead of suppressing the thing that you don't want to look at, you say, okay, I am whatever, I am feeling this way, or I did have this experience, or whatever, right? So then you look at, one of the 3 emotions, or maybe they're all tied to whatever you're working through. And then you look at those beliefs, and for people who do have a bit of faith, and by faith, I don't mean religion. I mean, who have a connection to spirit, you can offer, and this is cultures all over the world have done this for a long time. We can give our emotions to whatever we consider our divine mother, or we can give them to the divine earth, because the brain doesn't understand. People, there is this very non-helpful phrase that everybody walks around saying, oh, just let it go, let it go. Well, the brain doesn't know how to let it go. The brain is logical and linear, so the brain has to put something somewhere, right? So we can put our emotions, we can give the emotions to the mother, and then people might think, well, like, oh, well, Mother Earth has already suffered so much, why do we want to be giving her all negative emotions? Well, no, they're like compost. It's like fertilizer, right? and and she digs it, and she'll send it back to you as love and chi and prana and vitality. So, and it really works if you start with this, like, okay, I'm going to give it to the mother. And then where do you give your beliefs? You give your beliefs to the father. However you want to envision that. You can envision your eternal father holding a crystal ball, or you can envision a column of light in the sky, or wherever your imagination takes you, but know that you're giving it to a masculine presence that is your eternal father, that is connected with the celestial realms, or the air, or the sky, however you want to look at it, right? And then, if you think about, it doesn't matter on what continent or what culture you came from. We used to do this every day without knowing, because we slept on the ground, right? So the earth was transmuting and transforming our emotions, and the starlight was washing away our beliefs, and we woke up refreshed every morning. But we don't do that now. We sleep inside a house on a bed, not under the starlight, so then we have to use these either we can go sleep outside again, and if that doesn't appeal to us, we can try these techniques. And then, so if you are having something that's hard to work on, you can work through, like, the emotions and the beliefs we just said. Now you have a place to put them. And then you do that thing where you surrender to source, like we talked about in the prayer, right? You give yourself over to love, because that's ultimately what source is, right? And you really, it's not just about a mental exercise of like, okay, I said it, I surrender to source, but really start to play around with that as you're working with that. Not you, but the pejorative you, or anyone watching now or on the replay. And then, accepting. Sometimes we have a hard time accepting, but really you could think of acceptance as acknowledging. Okay, can I just acknowledge that something happened? I don't have to like it. To accept something does not mean you have to like it, but can you acknowledge that it happens? And when you're acknowledging that, to be in the witness state, right? Because this me might be a little more attached, or might want to fight with something, but if I'm just being the witness, it's a lot easier than to step into acceptance and acknowledging. It's like you have a witness acknowledging, yes, that did happen to you, right? And then from there, you go into forgiveness, and forgiveness is very sticky and tricky, and there's all sorts of books written on it. And forgiveness always left a bad taste in my mouth, because it has this hierarchical thing, like, oh, you're down here because you did this bad thing, and I'm going to forgive you, as if I'm like some kind of a god, right? But really, forgive in this context is to forego the body chemistry, right? So you're foregoing. To forgive is to forego. I'm going to hand it over before this thing becomes body chemistry that is continually looping in my central nervous system. I'm going to forego that. I'm going to give it over before, right? That's what and to me, that is the most brilliant definition of forgiveness I think I've ever heard. Then to really take some time to have compassion for yourself. Like, hey, before I would spin out, and now I've, grown to where I can kind of go through this process, or I'm taking different steps, or I'm making different choices, and I do acknowledge that happened, and I've surrendered to source, and wow, that's big. And I acknowledge myself for this experience, where I felt I was a victim, or where I was frustrated, or whatever it is, and really extend that compassion to ourselves that we extend so easily to others, right? And then just the gratitude, like, I'm grateful for this precious human life. I am grateful for this precious human life. What would life look like if we said that 21 times every morning, or however many times before we went to bed? Really presencing our gratitude for this precious human life, because it's so easy to get caught up in, like, oh, I've got too many things on my plate, and I'm tired, and I'm confused, and I don't have the energy to back what I need to do, and I've got all these problems. And it's like, whoa, stop. Just
Yeah.
like, be
Yeah.
grateful, because, you know, it's so much more, I think, of a big deal to have this human experience than we're really tuning into at any given moment. But when you do stop to presence, that is what is happening. And it's hard not to have gratitude. And if you can't have gratitude for that, pick something you can have gratitude for. Maybe it's the rose you're smelling, maybe it's anything. Maybe you just had a chance to eat some chocolate that you love, like, just to find the gratitude, but really to be grateful for this precious human life.
And that's,
So
on that note, just to carry on, I think that feeling, so to use feeling and breathing, and the technique I show people really is to put your hand on your heart, or two hands on your heart, get a snuggly sort of a feeling, and then bring to mind something that brings that feeling, that really loving feeling, to your heart. So for example, I might use one of my grandsons, and see their face in my mind, and then with that face will come the feeling of love. So I can get shut of the grandson then and keep the feeling, because they've done their job. So with that feeling then, it's to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5, stop, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, stop. But it's a heart-centric feeling, and it's almost like you feel, as you draw in, it's like a cleansing energy. And just in that sort of momentary stop, you pick out all the guns that you've built up, and as you breathe it out, you've given it back to the universe to sort it out for you, really. But the important thing about that, from a neuroscience point of view, is that if you breathe at around about 6 breaths per minute, and that's something that you have to practice, because people normally breathe 12 breaths per minute at rest. So you can work to 9 then, and then maybe to 8, and then 7. And when you get to 6, the two components of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, they start to work harmoniously with one another in that breathing state. And what actually happens then is they start to come together. Your hemispheres of your brain start to work together. So there's a complete multi-systems coherence that happens. And then sometimes people have like a spiritual awakening feeling there as well. So just 3 10-minute sessions a day for 90 days. If you can carry on with that, I swear to you, it'll change your life, because that's what's doing it for me. And I use a piece of equipment. And if anybody's interested in this, I never made this up, but I did my own independent research and sort of caught up with the Institute of Heart Math, it's called. It's a USA thing. And I would recommend anybody, because they are the world leaders in this, go onto their website. They've got loads of free resources. If you're into the spiritual side of things, you can go down the spiritual route. If you like the science, you can go down the science route. But in simplicity, Julie, if you put your hands on your heart, right, and you just get that breathing feeling all the way in and all the way out, what actually happens, and I'll say a bit of neuroscience here, it's like a soup that develops in your brain then. It's called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And when you actually create more of this and use positive emotion, you actually start to change the neural pathways and the neuroplasticity of your brain into a more positive and a more free-flowing sort of habitual state. And that's what happens. You almost like bypass the negative emotion, because I think it's important. And I love what you've said there. Rather than use the word acceptance, acknowledgement's a good one. So you can acknowledge, hang on, I'm in a negative, egocentric, contracted state here, or whatever you want to say. I feel tense. What I need to do is put this lovely feeling in my heart, breathe it away, and just carry on breathing it, And that's what I teach people, really. And to see people doing it. I can tell some people who don't do it, because when I put them back on the monitor after 3 months, I can tell whether or not they've been, doing it and stuff. So that's what I'm doing, and it's such a simple technique. But when you're in this open and flowing, free flowing state, try and listen in and develop a dialogue with your heart, And the way I see the heart is, as you do this, it's almost like a gate opens, and you can go deeper then, and you can actually have direct contact with your soul then, which is the deepest part of the human being, as far as I understand, And that's when all the information starts to flow. So there you go, boss. Thanks.
Hey, quick question for you. Do you practice something called cobra breath?
I've never heard of it.
Have you? Well, I noticed you have the
The caduceus.
Square and the circle, and then the triangle,
yeah.
sometimes also called the philosopher's stone. But that's have you ever heard of Babaji?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a practice that he brought forth called cobra breath, or it's also called gosh, I'm blanking out because I always call it cobra breath. Kriya Kundalini Pranayama, basically. Yeah. Is that a practice that you do?
Yeah. In my own terms. Yeah. I use a lot of breath work, and when people go further into breath work, you can use different nostril techniques then, and use imagination, and you can actually send the breath or the energy right to different parts of the body to actually start to release different parts of the body, because I think it works from the meridians through the nadis, and from the nadis into the electrical system, which then stimulate and relax the muscles then, so any muscle contraction is an obstruction to the free flow of this energy. So the general breathing at 6 breaths per minute gets them into understanding the energetics, and then you can start to work. Something I've learned, which is very important, is that you have to disentangle. I call it quantum disentanglement. You have to disentangle the contractions and constrictions that you laid down in the order that they were laid down. Now, how do you know? You have to go into your intuition and say, will you guide me to the thing that needs releasing next? Because if your head tells you need to do that, you could be actually obstructing the process, you see. So that's why it's so important to be guided by spirit or intuition or whatever, so it can guide you to the next daily process of release and letting go.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if we've fathomed the importance of imagination, because imagination does not mean making something up.
No.
Imagination means something that far surpasses what your intellect wants to create, And imagination, there's a lot more neuroplasticity. The intellect is kind of already done. It's formed. It's got its ideas. It's just going to put it forth this way. In imagination, there's room for everything.
I couldn't agree more. And that's what I say. I think true imagination is a feeling, in my view, right? And that's the emergence thing. It's more like a vision rather than something that you conjure up with your head, because this will just keep sending back the old patterns. Oh, look, it's that situation again. Oh, well, I did this last time. I'm going to try something different. That might be completely wrong. If you go into your heart and you say, look, I'm in this situation, please show me what to do, and have an attitude of, because I don't know, right? And then if you've got this clear screen in your mind, and then suddenly an inspiration or an idea pops up, that's probably the thing that you need to take action on. But it's practice, Julia, yourself. I mean, I do a lot of deep meditation where I just sit there, not looking for anything, just sort of clear space in my head. And it's almost like I get downloads, and I'm not looking for thinking there. When I come out of that sort of silence, I carry on with my day, and throughout the day, new sort of thoughts pop in, and that's how it seems to work for me anyway. So on that note, Julie, look, we've gone right over time here now. Right? So thanks very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
No, thanks. And maybe you can come on further down the line again, and we can talk about the fusion of the 5 elements and all that sort of stuff.
That would be fun.
Yeah, because I've done a lot of work with Mantak Cheer's stuff, and basically, and all gate opening at different chakras and things like that. So maybe we could go a bit deeper into that next time.
I love that. That would be awesome.
Good.
Thank
So
you for
thanks very
having me.
much.
This was fun. This was fun. Yeah. Thank you for well, thank you for the gift of you. It's really a joy to watch you when you and Todd speak, and I've been checking out your YouTube channel. Lots of helpful information. You keep me laughing. I appreciate you, and I'm glad that you made it out of that terrible conundrum you were in, and now you're doing your thing and sharing yourself with the world. I have a lot of gratitude for you.
Thanks very much, Julie. I've got that lovely feeling going up my spine again. So thanks very much. And I'll speak to you when the time is right.
Okay, sounds
Okay.
good.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thanks very much for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye.